The courtroom was unusually still when the veteran stepped inside, his limp dragging softly across the polished floor. People noticed how tightly he clutched the folded flag, fingers trembling with a mixture of reverence and fear. Judge Caprio lifted his eyes from the docket and paused. Something about this man's presence shifted the energy of the room. The clerk whispered that this defendant had racked up multiple violations, blocking hydrants, expired meters, abandoned vehicle warnings, yet he stood like someone unsure if he even belonged here. When asked to confirm his name, the man hesitated, blinking rapidly as if searching through a fog. The silence grew uncomfortable, thick enough that even the judge's gentle tone couldn't ease it. The crowd leaned closer, sensing something deeper than a simple parking case. Something was wrong, badly wrong. And as the veteran rubbed the corner of the folded flag with his thumb, his voice cracked for the first time. "Your Honor, I don't remember parking there. I don't remember much of that day." A ripple of tension swept through the courtroom. This wasn't arrogance, nor defiance. This was a man standing in a battle only he could see. And Judge Caprio knew instantly that this hearing would not be ordinary. It would be a test of patience, humanity, and truth buried beneath fractured memory. Judge Caprio leaned forward, studying the man with gentle precision, the way a doctor studies an X-ray searching for the break. "Let's take this slow," he said softly, but the veteran still flinched like he was bracing for a reprimand. His gaze darted around the courtroom, scanning exits, corners, shadows, classic hypervigilance, though most spectators misread it as guilt. When shown the photo of his car beside the fire hydrant, he squinted, leaning closer as though trying to recognize his own handwriting from a lifetime ago. "That's my car," he finally murmured. "But that day, it's gone. Like someone tore a page from the book." Judge Caprio caught the way the man's jaw tightened, as if holding back a storm. People whispered in the gallery, some sympathetic, others skeptical. The veteran's breathing grew uneven, and his fingers traced the crease of the flag like it was an anchor tethering him to reality. "Sir?" the judge asked. "Do you often experience these memory gaps?" The veteran hesitated, shame flickering in his eyes. "Sometimes I forget where I'm going. Sometimes I forget where I've been." A single cough echoed through the room. Even before the judge spoke again, everyone knew this case was no longer about parking. It was about unraveling a mind fighting itself. What followed was a tense unraveling of detail. The prosecutor listed the citations in an even tone: blocked hydrant, expired plate, 3 overnight enforcement warnings, yet each word seemed to hit the veteran like shrapnel. His shoulders tensed, breathing quickened, and for a moment Judge Caprio raised his palm to silently pause the prosecution. "Sir," the judge said gently, "are you feeling all right?" The veteran pressed the folded flag tighter to his chest. "This was my buddy's," he whispered. "I talk to him when I get lost." The courtroom stiffened. His gaze drifted toward the ceiling as though listening to something far away. When he looked back to the judge, his voice carried both fragility and stubborn pride. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, Your Honor. I'm trying to stay oriented." Judge Caprio's eyes softened, but he maintained the firmness of a man responsible for fairness. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he assured. Yet beneath his calm voice, a pulse of suspense grew, because the judge sensed there was an unseen reason behind those forgotten hours. Something unresolved. Something waiting to surface, whether the veteran wanted it to or not. The judge requested the veteran take a moment to breathe, but instead the man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. The courtroom watched as he flipped slowly through pages filled with shaky handwriting, dates, addresses, reminders, names. "I write everything down so I don't lose track," he said. "But this day, this page is blank." The eerie emptiness of the page hit harder than any accusation. It wasn't laziness or neglect, it was a void. Judge Caprio asked him why he believed his memory was failing. The veteran's eyes welled, though no tears fell. "Blast wave," he said quietly. "Years ago. Doctors said it might come back, or it might get worse." The doubt in his voice sliced through the courtroom's skepticism. The prosecutor lowered her eyes. Even she felt the shift. The judge's gavel lay untouched, forgotten for a moment, as he weighed not just evidence but the emotional storm unfolding before him. "We'll approach this with care," he said. But beneath that calm reassurance, an unspoken truth loomed. This man's life was slipping through the cracks of his own mind. When the judge asked where the veteran had been going on the day of the violation, the veteran froze. His face twitched, confusion, then agitation, then something darker. "I don't know," he whispered. "I remember leaving home. I remember the sound of traffic. Then it's just haze." The crowd shifted uneasily. A woman in the gallery placed a hand on her mouth, moved by the struggle unfolding. Judge Caprio leaned back, tapping his pen gently. "Do you ever find yourself somewhere without knowing how you got there?" he asked. The veteran nodded slowly. "Sometimes my feet remember things my head doesn't." A chill passed through the room. "Sir, have you ever been evaluated for early-onset neurological conditions?" the judge asked carefully. The veteran cracked a bitter, weary smile. "VA's been backed up for months. I'm somewhere in a stack." His voice trembled, not from weakness, but from frustration carved over years. The atmosphere tightened, thick with empathy and suspense. The courtroom wasn't watching a man dodge accountability. They were watching a man fight the ghosts of his own brain. The judge asked the bailiff to bring the photo evidence closer, hoping a clearer view might trigger something, but the moment the veteran leaned forward, his whole demeanor shifted. His pupils narrowed, breath tightened, and a faint tremor spread through his hand. He stared at the image, not the hydrant, not the ticket, but the faint reflection in the car window. "That's me," he murmured. "But I look wrong." The courtroom leaned in, sensing the shift. Judge Caprio kept his tone soft. "What do you see?" The veteran swallowed hard. "I see fear." The judge paused. "Fear of what?" The veteran's grip on the flag intensified. "Of forgetting," he whispered. "Of losing myself in the middle of somewhere I should know." His voice cracked as he pressed a shaking hand to his temple. "Some days, Your Honor, it's like walking through a fog that only I can see." The silence in the courtroom was so sharp it felt like glass. Even the prosecutor looked unsettled, her posture softening as she watched him fight through the invisible maze in his mind. The judge slowly nodded, empathy radiating from every crease in his face. "Let's try something different," he offered. "Close your eyes. Don't force the memory, just let your mind wander." The veteran obeyed, breathing shakily. After a moment, he whispered, "I hear sirens. Not war sirens, city ones." The crowd straightened in their seats. Something new was breaking through. Judge Caprio encouraged him gently. "What else do you hear?" The veteran's eyelids fluttered, jaw tightening as though he was stepping into a moment he wasn't sure he wanted to relive. "A woman shouting," he said slowly. "Not angry, scared." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge exchanged a cautious glance with the prosecutor, who instinctively leaned forward. "And then?" Caprio asked. The veteran's breath hitched. "A crash. Metal. Glass." His hand shook harder around the folded flag. "I wasn't parking, Your Honor. I was avoiding something." The tension spiked as people instinctively leaned closer. "Sir," the judge continued, "are you saying something happened right before you left your vehicle?" The veteran nodded, eyes still closed. "I think someone ran into the street. I think I slammed the brakes. I think I panicked. And then..." His voice thinned, collapsing into raw vulnerability. "Then the fog hit." His eyes opened slowly, filled with both terror and relief. "Your Honor," he said weakly, "I didn't abandon the car. I abandoned the moment." The room felt suspended between sympathy and suspicion. Had he witnessed something traumatic? Was something buried beneath that missing hour? Judge Caprio sensed the emotional fracture widening, and the suspense tightening. "We're going to get to the truth," he said firmly, but kindly. "You're not on trial for your memory. You're here so we can understand what happened." The veteran nodded shakily, finally exhaling, though his shoulders remained tense. Something big was hiding in that missing moment, and the judge wasn't about to let it stay buried. Judge Caprio motioned for the clerk to bring the city incident logs from the day of the violation. It wasn't standard procedure for a parking case, but nothing about this situation was standard. As the clerk searched, the veteran kept rubbing the corner of the folded flag, grounding himself with every stroke, his breath shallow but steadying. A spectator in the back whispered, "He looks like he's reliving something." And the room seemed to agree. When the clerk returned with a thin folder, the judge flipped through it with deliberate calm. Then his expression shifted, just a small change, but enough for the crowd to notice. "Sir," he said, "on the same block and within the same hour, there was a report of a pedestrian nearly struck by a vehicle." The gallery stiffened. The prosecutor leaned in. The veteran blinked rapidly, confusion twisting into fear. "Pedestrian?" he repeated as though tasting the word. "Who?" The judge scanned the document. "A woman mid-30s. No injury. She refused medical assistance. The driver left the scene before officers arrived." A pulse of dread went through the veteran's eyes. "Left the scene?" he echoed. Caprio raised a gentle hand. "There's no accusation here. The description of the car doesn't match yours. But the timing is close." The veteran's breathing sped up again. "Maybe I wasn't the one who hit her," he murmured, "but maybe I saw it." The tension crescendoed. No one knew whether the missing memory hid guilt, trauma, or something far more complicated. Judge Caprio softened his voice. "Sometimes the mind erases what's too overwhelming to face." The veteran stared down at the folded flag, thumb trembling. "Sir, what if it wasn't the war I was reliving that day? What if it was something that happened right here?" The judge let the words settle, like dust drifting in slow motion after a blast. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the bench, speaking in a tone so steady it pulled the entire courtroom back into focus. "Let's go step by step," he said. "Where were you before this incident?" The veteran hesitated, eyes searching the floor like it had answers carved into the grain. "A pharmacy," he finally replied. "I remember being there. Picking up medication." Judge Caprio noted it carefully. "And after you left the pharmacy?" A long pause. "Too long." The veteran blinked, visibly struggling. "That's where the fog starts," he admitted. "But I remember seeing children." The prosecutor tilted her head. "Children?" The veteran nodded, rubbing his temples. "Running across the crosswalk. A woman chasing them." His eyes widened as a flash surfaced. "They weren't watching the traffic." The room inhaled collectively. "And I was driving toward them." His breathing turned shallow, but he continued pushing himself through the haze. "I honked. I braked hard. The car jerked left." Judge Caprio's voice softened. "Did you hit anyone?" The veteran shook his head immediately. "No. I'm sure I didn't. But something spooked me. Something made me feel like I was back, over there." His gaze drifted far away, pupils trembling. "It wasn't the children, Your Honor, it was the sound." He lifted his eyes, filled with dawning terror. "A car behind me hit something. That's the crash I remember." A ripple went through the courtroom, sharp, electric. If that was true, then the veteran might have witnessed an accident that was never properly reported. And perhaps his mind locked it away to protect him. Judge Caprio folded his hands, understanding the weight of what was unraveling. "Sir," he said quietly, "this may not be a parking hearing anymore. This may be something far more important." The courtroom felt like it had tilted into a different reality. No longer a simple traffic matter, but the slow uncovering of a buried event the veteran's mind had locked away. Judge Caprio took a moment, glancing at the prosecutor, who now wore an expression halfway between concern and curiosity. "Let's trace the sequence," the judge said gently. "You braked. You swerved. You heard a crash behind you." The veteran nodded, his breathing uneven. "Yes, Your Honor. It was sharp, like metal folding. He paused, squinting as if trying to pull the memory from deep underwater. And someone screamed. The gallery tensed. Caprio kept his voice steady, grounding. You didn't see what caused the crash? The veteran shook his head painfully. No. I think I froze. My body, it reacts before my mind can catch up. Sometimes everything feels like it's happening through a window. He swallowed hard. I remember gripping the wheel so tight my fingers went numb. He pressed his hand to his chest. Then the panic came. That kind of panic doesn't ask permission, it just takes over. The courtroom listened without a whisper. The veteran continued, voice trembling. Next thing I remember, I was outside the car. The hydrant was right there. I must have parked without thinking. My mind was still, somewhere else. Caprio nodded slowly, compassion and suspicion intertwining. Sir, when you stepped out of the car, did you see anyone? Anyone injured? The veteran closed his eyes again, trying to force a fragment loose. Then a faint flicker crossed his expression. A shadow, he whispered. Someone bending over. But I couldn't move closer. I felt paralyzed. His hands tightened around the flag. I didn't abandon responsibility, Your Honor. I abandoned myself because I didn't know where I was, or when. Judge Caprio exhaled softly, tapping his pen on the bench, a subtle rhythm that seemed to anchor the room. Sir, he said, your memory may be fractured, but your honesty is clear. The prosecutor rose cautiously. Your Honor, permission to request the city camera footage from that intersection? The judge nodded. Granted. Her tone softened as she added, we need to verify if another vehicle was involved. The veteran looked both relieved and terrified, as though validation itself could be a double-edged sword. Caprio addressed him again. You're not in trouble for panicking. Trauma plays tricks on the mind. But then the judge shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing, not in accusation, but in careful investigation. There's something you're still holding back, he said calmly. The veteran stiffened. I'm not hiding anything. Caprio's voice stayed gentle. Not intentionally. But something in your posture tells me you're afraid of what the truth might reveal. The gallery leaned in, sensing a major emotional crack forming. The veteran's lips trembled. Your Honor, what if I caused the crash? What if someone got hurt because I froze? His voice broke on the last word. He looked at the flag in his hands, guilt washing over him. I've already lost pieces of myself. I don't want to find out I took pieces from someone else. The judge leaned forward, tone firm yet fatherly. We won't assume anything. We'll find the truth together. A palpable tension lingered in the air. The suspense wasn't just about what happened on the street. It was about whether the veteran could withstand whatever truth waited at the edge of his missing memory. Judge Caprio asked the bailiff to bring over a water bottle, noticing how the veteran's hands were shaking, not with aggression, but with the kind of trembling that comes from holding too much inside for too long. The veteran took it, nodding a silent thank you, though his grip on the folded flag never loosened. Caprio's voice softened to a level almost fatherly. Sir, listen to me carefully. Whatever happened that day, whatever you saw or didn't see, you're here now. You're safe. And you're not being judged for what your trauma made you forget. The veteran swallowed hard, his throat visibly tight. But the guilt feels real, he whispered. Even if the memory doesn't. The prosecutor, now far less adversarial than earlier, approached with a printout from the city's emergency call logs. Your Honor, there was indeed a 911 call from that street. 23 minutes before the parking ticket. The courtroom buzzed. Caprio raised a hand for silence. What was the call about? He asked. The prosecutor scanned the paper. Caller reported a minor accident. A driver clipped a street sign after swerving around pedestrians. She looked up. No injuries. No hit and run. Police arrived, found the car abandoned but with hazards on. Vehicle registered to a young mother who later came back to move it. The veteran's face drained of color. A young mother. he repeated, his voice hollow. Something inside him clicked, something he didn't want to believe. Caprio leaned closer. Sir, does that detail mean something to you? The veteran stared at the flag, then at the floor, then back at the judge with a trembling gaze. Your Honor, I think I know the shadow I saw. His voice cracked. I think it was the mother. Kneeling. The suspense tightened like a rope around the courtroom. The judge allowed him a moment, letting the weight of his own words settle before gently urging him on. Take your time. Tell us what you remember. The veteran breathed shakily, eyes unfocused, as fragments began stitching themselves together. I heard the crash behind me, he said. I froze. I always freeze before I can move. Old training, old fear. He rubbed his temples, searching the fog. Then I got out. My knees felt weak, like they were made of sand. He swallowed. I remember seeing her, the mother, bending towards something on the ground. His voice dropped to a fragile whisper. I thought it was a child. Gasps fluttered through the gallery. Caprio stayed steady, grounding the moment. But was it? He asked softly. The veteran blinked, confusion tightening into clarity. No, he finally said. It was her groceries. They scattered everywhere. She was trying to gather them. The tension in the courtroom released slightly, but only for a moment. Because the veteran's hands shook harder than before. Your Honor, she looked at me. His voice deepened with shame. Not with anger. Not with fear. With worry. Caprio leaned in. Why worry? The veteran's voice broke entirely. Because I was shaking. She asked if I was okay? Me. Not her. He pressed a fist against his forehead. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even form words. I just stood there like a statue. The gallery watched him unravel piece by piece. She touched my arm. He continued, barely audible. And said, it's all right. Nothing happened. You're okay. His eyes filled with painful disbelief. I think she grounded me. And that moment is the last thing I remember before the fog swallowed everything. The judge's expression turned solemn, as if understanding something important. The veteran's memory wasn't hiding guilt, it was hiding mercy he wasn't ready to accept. The courtroom sat suspended in a fragile silence, as if even the air didn't want to break the moment. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, studying the veteran with an expression that mixed gravity and empathy. Sir, he said gently, it sounds like that woman didn't see you as a threat, she saw you as someone in pain. The veteran shook his head slowly, his voice trembling. I don't deserve that kind of kindness, Your Honor. Caprio tilted his head. Why not? The veteran stared down at his hands, the knuckles white, the flag pressed against his chest like a shield. Because real soldiers don't freeze. Real soldiers don't fall apart in public. Real soldiers don't lose their minds in the middle of a quiet street. His voice rose, not in anger, but in heartbreak. I was trained to protect. To react. But ever since the injury, my mind, it betrays me. He tapped the side of his head with 2 fingers, almost apologetically. Sometimes I forget what I'm doing. Sometimes I forget where I'm going. And sometimes, his voice cracked. Sometimes I forget who I was supposed to be. A whisper moved through the gallery, compassion, disbelief, sorrow. Caprio's tone turned firm, almost fatherly. A real soldier, sir, isn't measured by never feeling fear. It's measured by how you carry the weight that fear leaves behind. The veteran's eyes glossed with tears he refused to let fall. Then why does it feel like I failed? The judge leaned in, lowering his voice. Because you never truly learned how to forgive yourself. And that is one of the hardest battles a soldier will ever face. The veteran inhaled sharply, the truth cutting deeper than any accusation. Something inside him shifted, a quiet, painful acceptance that scared him more than the memory itself. But just as the emotional dust began to settle, the prosecutor cleared her throat, a soft, cautious sound that carried unexpected weight. Your Honor, there's another detail. She held up a tablet showing a still image from a nearby building's security camera. "This footage was pulled from the request you granted earlier." The courtroom stiffened again. The prosecutor turned the screen toward Caprio first. His eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in deep concentration. Then he looked up at the veteran. "Sir, I need you to see this." The veteran tensed, shoulders rigid. The bailiff approached slowly, placing the screen in front of him. The image was grainy but clear enough, his car, hazards blinking, parked crookedly next to the hydrant. Behind it, another car sat at an odd angle, front bumper dented. People could be seen bending over, one of them clearly the young mother. But there was something else. Someone standing beside her, helping gather the scattered groceries. And that someone was the veteran himself. His hand hovered in midair, as though he were in two timelines at once. "That's me?" he whispered. Caprio nodded gently. "Helping her." The veteran's face twisted with disbelief. "But I don't remember that." The prosecutor spoke softly. "Sir, you didn't freeze. You didn't run. You stepped in." A tremble ran through him, not of fear, but of shock. He had been living under the weight of a guilt that wasn't real. Caprio leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes trauma doesn't erase our worst moments. Sometimes it erases the moments we don't believe we deserve to remember." The veteran finally exhaled, but it sounded like a man who had been holding his breath for years. Hiroki's shoulders slump slightly as the courtroom begins to exhale, but the tension isn't fully gone. Judge Caprio notices how the veteran still grips the folded flag like a lifeline. "Sir," he says gently, "even though this charge is dismissed, the court wants to understand something important. How do you feel now?" The veteran swallows hard, eyes fixed on the polished wood of the bench. "Confused, relieved, scared," he admits. "Scared because I finally remember that moment. And I'm not sure I deserve to survive it, in one piece, while forgetting the rest." The judge nods slowly, sensing the depth of his turmoil. "Memory isn't always kind," Caprio says, "but sometimes it shows us what matters most." The veteran presses the flag tighter, almost instinctively. "I didn't realize I was still carrying all of it, the fear, the guilt, the memories I couldn't name. I thought the tickets, the fines, that was my punishment. But it wasn't. It was this weight." A hush falls across the gallery. The prosecutor lowers her gaze, softening in her stance. Even the spectators lean forward, feeling the unspoken truth. Trauma is invisible, yet it leaves marks that no law can measure. Hiroki lifts his head, voice trembling. I just want to remember things the right way. Not half. Not wrong." Judge Caprio leans in, fatherly, calm yet firm. "Then let's start rebuilding those memories, one piece at a time." The judge gestures subtly to the clerk, who brings forward a small, framed photo of Hiroki in his uniform, decades ago. The courtroom watches as the veteran's eyes well with tears, not from guilt, but from recognition, from confronting a past he had long buried. He traces the edges of the frame with a trembling finger, as if grounding himself in a world that once felt real. "I was proud once," he whispers. "Before the fog, before everything." Judge Caprio leans forward. "That pride isn't gone. It's waiting inside you. And the court sees it." The gallery murmurs softly, feeling the humanity in the exchange. Hiroki takes a deep breath, releasing it slowly, the weight of decades pressing against him. "It's strange," he says, voice raw, "to be judged, and instead be forgiven. Not by someone else, by the universe maybe. Or by fate." He presses the folded flag against his chest, trembling less now, as if finally finding balance. Caprio's eyes remain steady, observing the emotional transformation without words. The tension in the room softens, but the suspense isn't gone. There is still a missing piece, one final truth lurking at the edge of Hiroki's mind, waiting to surface. And everyone knows that when it does, it will change the way they understand him entirely. The courtroom remained silent as Caprio leaned forward, resting his arms on the bench, giving Hiroki the space to collect himself. "Sir, I know this has been difficult," he said gently, "but sometimes the truth reveals itself in fragments." Hiroki's eyes darted to the gallery, then back to the judge, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. I think I remember something else," he said, voice almost a whisper. "When I swerved, I heard a voice behind me, not the children, not the mother, a man shouting something urgent. I didn't see him, but I felt his presence." The veteran's hands trembled, gripping the folded flag tighter, knuckles widening. Caprio nodded, calm and fatherly, guiding him gently. "And what does that presence mean to you?" Hiroki swallowed, blinking back tears. "I don't know, maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe someone was there to prevent something worse." A shiver ran through the gallery. Spectators leaned forward, captivated. Even the prosecutor's usual composure cracked. She softened visibly, realizing the gravity of what the veteran had endured and survived. The tension was thick, palpable, a storm of fear, relief, and suspense hanging in the air. Hiroki's chest rose and fell rapidly as he whispered, "I was frozen, but someone else acted." Caprio's eyes glimmered with understanding. "And sometimes, sir," he said softly, "the world protects us, even when we cannot protect ourselves." Hiroki's gaze shifted to the ceiling, mind racing as fragments of the day came back in a kaleidoscope of fear and relief. The sound of metal, the screech, the woman, the groceries. His voice trembled, each word layered with disbelief and gratitude. "It all comes together now. I didn't fail anyone. I just forgot the part where someone else helped." A whisper ran through the courtroom, almost reverent, as the realization struck everyone. The veteran had carried guilt for something that wasn't his fault. Caprio's expression remained calm, his tone unwavering but tender. "Memory is a strange gift, Mr. Sato. Sometimes it protects us. Sometimes it hides mercy until we're ready to see it." Hiroki's hands released the flag slightly, a visible exhale escaping him. "I carried it all alone, thinking I had to bear it." Caprio leaned forward, voice steady, fatherly, almost like a teacher speaking to a student he knows has struggled enough. "You never carried it alone. The world, sometimes quietly, intervenes for us." The gallery murmured softly, each person feeling the profound weight of truth unfolding in front of them. Hiroki's eyes glistened with the dawning comprehension of a life nearly lost to invisible burdens, and the suspense shifted into an emotional catharsis. He could finally let go, not of the memory, but of the false responsibility he had carried for decades. The judge rested his hands on the bench, locking eyes with Hiroki, his voice calm yet commanding the room. "Mr. Sato, the court finds that the tickets and violations were circumstantial, but the lessons here are far greater than fines or penalties. Life often burdens us with guilt, fear, and memories we cannot face, until someone shows us mercy, or until we forgive ourselves." Hiroki's chest heaved as he nodded slowly, finally understanding the depth of what Caprio was conveying. "Your Honor, I never knew forgiveness could feel like this," he whispered, voice cracking. Caprio smiled gently. "It is not just mercy from the world, sir, it is mercy you must offer yourself." The veteran looked down at the folded flag, pressed it to his chest, then slowly lifted it, feeling the weight shift into a lighter presence. Judge Caprio continued, "Sometimes we carry shadows of the past, but every act of kindness, every hand extended, it leaves a mark that time cannot erase." The gallery, silent until now, released a collective exhale, sensing the profound truth. Hiroki had been judged, not for his past, but for how he lived through it. As he left the courtroom, flag in hand, shoulders steady for the first time in decades, he glanced back once, eyes meeting Caprio's. A subtle smile formed on the judge's face. "Remember, sir," he murmured, almost to himself, "even the lost memories can teach us who we truly are." And with that, the courtroom returned to its usual rhythm, leaving behind an unforgettable story of trauma, heroism, and the quiet power of mercy, one that would echo far beyond its walls.